Hey girl, let's talk crime. My name is Angel and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the life of Marcus Wesson. And if you have not heard about him, don't trip because I have not either. It's starting to become a little bit shocking that I have this passion for true crime and some of these cases that are so heavy I've never heard about. Marcus Wesson was born on August 22nd, 1946 in Kansas to his parents Benjamin and Carrie. His father Benjamin was extremely abusive. He was an alcoholic and he was very violent towards his family. His mother is what we would call a religious nut, and it is suspected that she had a huge influence over Marcus's fascination with religion. Let's go back to Benjamin, his father. He would get drunk and he would flirt with his own children. They learned very early on how to not be a target of their father's incestual gestures. That was by hiding until he was sober. A neighborhood friend once said that his father had also paid him $50 to give him oral sex. Benjamin ends up running away with a male cousin and having this sexual relationship with him for 10 years. Then he wants to come back to his family as if he wasn't off just doing the most crazy stuff as if nothing had ever happened. So Marcus didn't make much of an impression in school. He was a very quiet kid, and even though he was a big kid, like 200 pounds plus, he would be bullied rather than be the person who would bully someone else. People said that he was friendly, but yeah. So he walked across the stage even though he did not have enough credits to graduate. And I remember in school they used to push kids through that they didn't want to deal with, that had behavioral issues. So yeah. After dropping out of high school, even though he walked across the stage, he joined the army, serving from 1966 to 1968 in Europe. He then returned to the U.S. and settled down in San Jose, California with a married woman by the name of Rosemary Solorio. Rosemary ends up leaving her abusive husband and moves Marcus into the home with her 8 children. In 1971, Rosemary gave birth to a baby boy who was Marcus's first child. At this point, Marcus became this cult leader. He had always had this fascination with religion. He would play these games called The Pastor and His Flock when he was younger. He always wanted to be in this position of master shepherd. Everyone was required to call him Lord or Master, and he was extremely abusive to everyone, including the infants. One of the children were beaten for 30 days straight because they had stolen a spoon of peanut butter without asking him for permission. So during this time, Marcus was grooming Rosemary's 8-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. He had told Rosemary and Elizabeth that the Lord had called her to be his bride and that she was special, and all the other tactics that predators use. He then creates this mock wedding for them, and I did see where it said that he didn't start sexually abusing her until 12, but I highly doubt that. If you are telling her at 8 years old that she's supposed to be your bride, then I'm pretty sure you're already looking at her in that way, and you're living with a woman, Rosemary, who obviously is afraid of you and allowing you to do whatever you want. I'm pretty sure he was abusing Elizabeth before the age of 12. When Elizabeth turns 15, she and Marcus legally marry, as that is the age of consent, and 4 months later they have their first child together. By the time she is 26 years old, she has given birth to 11 of Marcus's children. So this is weird. Elizabeth is living on one story with Marcus, and her mother, who was Marcus's ex-lover, is on another level in the same home. Eventually, Marcus felt that it was time for he and Elizabeth to find other living arrangements. Once they move out, Rosemary's oldest daughter, which is Elizabeth's sister, ends up leaving her 7 children with Marcus and Elizabeth because she was unable to care for them as she was in active addiction. Her children were being abused, they were being neglected and molested by being around the people that she would bring around them, and they just thought that this would be a safer option. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was not the only girl that he would abuse. He treated most of the girls this way and began assaulting them around the age of 8. Eventually, all of the children were being homeschooled, and he was able to teach them his version of the Bible with a twist, which said that he was God, vampires were real, and Jesus was one of them. So Marcus ends up marrying and having children with 3 of his nieces, Ruby, Rosa, and Sophina. These marriages were in addition to the 2 that he had with his own daughters. He was extremely possessive towards the women and the girls in the house, and to make sure that no one was in competition with him or that no one would try to partake in incestuous relations, he would keep the boys and the girls separated in the home. The girls were also forced to cover their bodies, wearing clothes that went all the way down to their ankles, long sleeve shirts. This also covered the bruises that he had inflicted upon them. If they were caught talking to any man outside of him, they were beat for it. They would constantly move. They were nomads, really. He would drag them from place to place. They lived in shacks that had no water, no electricity. They lived in tugboats, even in tents at one point. Everybody that was old enough to work was expected to run Marcus their money. He believed that he did not need to work as it was not his job, so he relied on everyone else to bring him money, and they also relied heavily on welfare. They were also brainwashed that even when they got the opportunity to leave the home to go work, they wouldn't tell anybody about the abuse that was going on in the home, and they would not alert police. Elizabeth, his wife, was to walk behind him with her head held down. She was not an equal at all, and she said that she didn't know that a lot of this was going on, but a lot of the children said if she pretended that she didn't know, then it's because she's acting really slow. 2 of Marcus's nieces, Ruby and Sophina, were tired of living this bizarre lifestyle. Like, they wanted out of the cult, and they begged Marcus to let them go, and he did agree, but only under one condition: they had to leave their children with him. They felt like they had no other option, and so that's exactly what they did. They tried to adjust to their lives to the best of their ability, but what they had gone through in the cult had really haunted them, and so they went back to get their children. They contacted family that was not in the cult, and they needed help. So once they showed up at this commercial building that Marcus had for the family that he was renting, they were demanding their children to come back. So I did read in an article where one of the women were able to get their son, and once she was running out, the other sister, Rosa, grabbed the son and took him back in. They were yelling at them, saying, "How could you betray him? Like, bow down to your master. You guys are such traitors," and all these other profanities. So with all of this loud arguing, the police were called. During this time, Marcus was super calm, super collected, and just seemed like he didn't have any problems. And so he had told the police that he would give the children back, but he wanted to have the opportunity to say goodbye to them. Also during this time, Sophina and Ruby are telling the officers that he's going to kill the children. Like, we had this suicide pact already prepared that if any time law enforcement would get involved, this is what would happen. But they allowed him to go in anyways. So he goes inside the house, he shuts the door and locks it behind him. About an hour and a half later, he comes out and his clothes are drenched in blood. This is where things get conflicting. So neighbors that were witnessing this situation said that they heard gunshots. The police, however, said that they did not. Once he comes out soaked in blood, officers immediately arrest him, and they go into this building looking for the children. They approach a back bedroom, and that's where they see a bloodbath. There are 9 bodies stacked on top of each other, ranging in ages from just 1 year old to 25. They are all his children and grandchildren. They all suffered a gunshot to the right eye. So Marcus pleads not guilty, and his defense is that the mother of the children had killed them and then herself, which is actually part of the plan. That was the suicide pact. That's what they were instructed to do. And then Marcus would explain everything and why it had to be the way that it was as Lord. Ultimately, the jury did find Marcus guilty, and he was charged for all counts of sexual assault and murder. He was sentenced to death in 2005, and he currently resides in San Quentin State Prison.